Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. As you can see, it's night, it's dark, but when I started this video it was still bright, so it took me a long time to do this video. And it starts from a request from one of my Patreon, a buddy of mine, and he asked me, I want to have an interface on JSUI where you can create squares and you can resize them. And I don't know what he wanted as an output, but you can get the index of the square selected. Would be cool also to draw the index as a number on top of the squares itself, but I have absolutely no any intention to do that now. You can reposition the squares by pressing a ctrl or command and dragging them, or you can go in the corners and resize them. And this works pretty okay. The only problem is when you have two overlapping squares and you click on one of them, they're going to be all selected, so that's a bit a bummer. But otherwise, everything works pretty nicely. Some functionalities like moving the squares I added after the video, but it's fairly easy, you can check it from the code. And having said that, I wish you a pleasant journey into this video. Have fun. Okay everyone, so as always we are starting from the very scratch. And what we got here is this JSUI object. And I go inside this inspector, I go into file name, and I choose the file I've just created, this tut one. It's an empty JavaScript file. There it goes. So first thing first, we need to have our mgraphic instance. So you know how it goes. We first need to initialize it. Then we want to say relative coord 0. We don't want to have relative coordinates. We want to have absolute coordinates in pixels, and then autofill 0 because we're going to fill these manually. Now let's get the essential stuff out of the way. So we need to have a paint function. That's the function in which we're going to draw all our stuff. Then we need to have an onClick function. This will give us the X and Y position of the mouse when we click on our JSUI object. We actually make it just off screen. And we need as well also an onDrag function. So onDrag, this will give us also the X and Y position of the mouse when we drag. It will actually also give us the button as well. So if we are pressing actually our mouse button or not, even in the onClick. I don't know if you're going to use that, but let's write it down. Good, so let's start creating our squares. Okay, we need an array, so I'm going to create a global variable, that's why I prefix it with G. Maybe let's make underscore G underscore something, and let's call it square array, squares array. And it's just an empty array for the moment. And then we need also the mouse position. This is also another global variable, so this is going to be the mouse. And let's say by default it's going to be at -1, -1. Right, so when we click, we want to set the mouse position to the X and Y values, so to the current mouse position. Good. And we also want to add a rectangle to our arrays of rectangles. So we click on the JSUI and we add a new rectangle to our array of rectangles. And then we're going to draw these squares inside, these rectangles inside our paint function. So let's do like this, G square array dot push. We're going to push an array with 4 elements. This is our rectangle. The first 2 elements are going to be the X and the Y, and then we need the width and the height of the rectangle. This we don't know yet, so we're just going to say 0, 0. Good, because then we will drag, and what we're going to do is that we are setting this rectangle width and height. So we are going to do like this, square array. We're going to get the latest element of this array by using the length of this array -1 as an index. And this is going to be equal to, actually let's do like this, let's say var rectangle is going to be equal to that. And rect2 is going to be equal to X, so this is the width of our rectangle, and rect3 is going to be equal to Y. This is going to be equal to the height of our rectangle. And then what we're going to do once we drag is to redraw. So we're going to call our paint function by using the function mgraphics.redraw. This is going to call our paint function. Now in our paint function, what we want to do is to say for every square in G square array, we're going to say mgraphics.rectangle. And the rectangle we're going to draw is G square array square, exactly. And then I guess we want to stroke it, so mgraphics.stroke inside the for loop. I think we could do it also outside the for loop. Nevertheless, we're going to do it inside. It's not such a big deal. And this sounds good. So let's check it out. Let's go in our patch and let's make a test. All right, it's working slightly, but not as we wanted. What is going on? It looks like the rectangle is much bigger than I intended to. So let's see what I did wrong. We push a square here, we push a rectangle. This is the top left corner, basically, the X and the Y. Then we need the width and the height. Oh, of course, that's not the width. That's not the width. Indeed, the width is going to be X minus our X position, right? And this is going to be Y minus our Y position, initial Y position. That's how we find the width and the height. This sounds much better, and in fact, now it's indeed working, and now we can draw a bunch of rectangles inside our JSUI window. Actually, let's make them a different color. So let's go here inside our paint function and say mgraphics.set, how is it, set source RGBA, and this we're just going to make it red, so red 1, 0, green 0, blue 1, alpha. This sounds good, and let's check it out. Looks good. Looks good. I want to have a clear function that will just delete everything. At the moment it doesn't exist, so let's create one. Let's go here, let's write function clear. And what we're going to do is that we're simply going to empty our squares array of squares. We're just setting it to an empty array, and then we're going to call the draw function, so it will just draw nothing, basically. Let's give it a try. Draw a bunch of squares, and then clear it. All right, it looks good. Looks like it's clearing it. All right, but what is being requested to me was not just that. That would have been easy. What was requested is like to make those squares clickable, that's okay, and resizable. So in order to resize them, what we need to do is to be able to access the position of their corners. So that's going to be slightly tricky, because every time we hover with the mouse on JSUI, we have to iter through all the squares. For every square, we have to check its corners, see if the mouse is close to one of those corners. And if the mouse is close to one of the corners, then we want to select it, want to be able to select it, and we want to be able to drag it with the mouse. So tricky stuff, tricky stuff. In order to do that, we are going to do that. We're going to create actually a class, I think. I'm going to create a class for our squares. So now let's actually do it in a new file. I'm not that lazy. So new file, I'm going to save it on the desktop as a JavaScript file, and I have already the square tooth, and I will just call this square tooth square class or something, square class, right? So here inside our main file, we have to go here and include that file. So include JS, they must be of course in the same folder. So JS square tooth square class.js. I think it's optional to write it, but let's write it. Good. Now inside our square class, we want to create our class square. And this will work like this. This will have a position. So this actually, let's call it this top left. It's going to be equal to, I think we're going to pass as a constructor the rect inside the object. So this is going to be the wall rect, so x, y, and height and width and height. So the top left variable is going to be assigned to the two first elements. This is going to be the x and y. And then we need this width is going to be equal to rect2, and this height is going to be equal to rect3. Right. And then let's create a function like getRect, which will return the wall rect. So let's do like this. Return an array which contains this top left 0, this top left 1, and then it has this dot width, this dot height. case we want to get the rectangle. Okay, perfect. So let's go in our main file. So when we go here on click, we just don't want to push an array, we want to push actually a new square with an array which contains actually the same stuff as before, the xy for the top left, 0 for the width, 0 for the height, right? So then when we are here on drag, we have to say this.get rect, and then let's create a new function to say this, to set the rect, so sect rect. Let's actually say just set width height, and then it's going to be, oh, I wrote it wrong. Then it's going to be our width, then it's going to be our height. So this width it's equal to width, and this height it's equal to height. Good. So let's go here. Once we set our width and height, let's do like this. It's going to be our width. Let's rename these our height. G square array, so the last element in this array, dot set width height to width and height. Okay, so let's give it a look and just check if this works. Doesn't work because it's undefined, right? This element is apparently undefined. Why? Oh, you know why? Because it's called squares, not square. JSUI squares, okay. What a bummer. Not enough arguments for rectangle. Alright, so of course, instead of our paint function now we need to say square.get rect. This will give us back our rectangle. Let's give it a try. Okay, now it works back as it was before. Everything is good. And now let's actually put our class to use. So let's create a new function inside the square class and say check if is clicked, I guess. And this is a function that takes as input the mouse position, which is going to be x and y. Okay, let's do like this. If mouse 0, or maybe let's make it more clear and just write both like mouse x. Let's just write mouse mx and my. So if mx is greater than our this top left 0 and mx is also smaller though that this top left 0 plus this width. So if it's greater than, let's actually make a little drawing. So that's our rectangle. So if the mouse is greater than this side, but is also smaller than this other side, so the x plus the width, if this is true, and let's go, oops, and let's go with the y. If my is greater than this top left 1 and my is smaller than this top left 1 plus this height. So if all these conditions are true, then let's create a variable here. Let's say this is selected equal to false, but in case we are selected, then this dot is selected is equal to true, and otherwise else this is selected is equal to false. So in case this is not true, it's definitely false. Alright, so now we have to go inside our main file. When we click, let's do like this. Let's say for var square. We have to iterate again through all our squares inside our window, because we have to check if we are clicking inside one of them. For square in G square array, if G square array square dot is check, how did we call this function? Check if it's clicked. Okay, and let's actually do like this. If this is true, then we return true as well. Otherwise, we return false. So we will get some value back from this function. And it's actually a function, so we have to put the parentheses. Okay, so if this is true, we clicked inside the rectangle. No need to check for all the other rectangles. We are just going to break this for loop. All right. And we are not actually going to push a new square, because it means we're just clicking inside a square. We are not going to push a new one, because otherwise, if I click inside a square, but nevertheless I'm still pushing a new square, this is not good, because we are adding square inside the square we just wanted to click into. So in order to do that, let's create a variable var is something clicked equal to 0, actually equal to false. And if it's true, now let's say this is actually true, something has been clicked. And we are going to push a new array only if we didn't click on anything, so we're just on some empty space. So if it's not true that is something clicked, then we push a new square inside our squares array. Okay, this sounds good. So let's try it out. If we drag, okay, if we click, it's still going to drag though. So we should do this, is something clicked should actually be a global variable, because we want to check it also on the onDrag function. So G is something clicked. So here we say G is something clicked true. If this is something, push a new square. And then in onDrag, again, if it's not true that something is clicked, then we can drag our new rectangle and do all the cool stuff. Okay, so let's give it a try. If I try now to click inside a rectangle, it should actually not do it, but it still does it. Right, so let's check if this is actually true. So let's post this to the console. Is clicked, right? And then we're just going to say new line. This should work. So let's give it a try. Alright, it's not working. Looks like our checking function is actually not working. Of course, because I forgot to pass the mouse input. Because as you can see, this takes the mouse X and the mouse Y as an input. Sorry. Which is actually X and Y. So, good. Let's try again. Okay, now it doesn't do it. Now, if we are inside the thing, it doesn't do it. And of course, this variable is always going to be true unless we set it to false. Inside is onClick function, before we check if something is clicked, we first set it to false, so by default it's going to be false. Then if we are clicking inside something, it's going to get true, but otherwise it's going to stay false. Good. So let's give it a try. Okay, now it's not going to create squares inside another square. This square is just going to be clicked, which is great. We're still going to be able to drag a new square inside another one, but that's not too much a big deal. We just want to not create squares directly inside another square. Okay, good. Now what I want to do is to highlight them if they are clicked. So in case they are clicked, we want to not stroke them, but fill them with the full color. So we're going to do like this. For one, this is going to be the rectangle. Then if G squares array square dot is clicked. So if this is true, that this is clicked, you remember we created our variable here, is selected. Is clicked, I find it, no, is selected is actually better. Okay, there's a bit of mixture between is selected and is clicked, but maybe let's actually make it everything consistent, and let's say is clicked. So inside here, this is selected variable, we're just going to call it is clicked, right? So if this is clicked, then mgraphics.fill, not autofill. Otherwise, if it's not clicked, then stroke. In case this is not clicked, it's just going to draw it as a frame quad. Otherwise, it's going to draw it as a filled rectangle. So let's draw a bunch of rectangles. Let's try to click on them. And nothing happens. Alright, you know why? Because I forgot to include the, once we click, I forgot to redraw the whole thing. So once we click, we should actually redraw. So if this is clicked, then mgraphics.redraw. This is going to redraw it. and it's going to repaint them, some clicked and some not. Okay, cool. So now we can actually click on them. Okay, it's a bit buggy because sometimes they are going to get deselected, sometimes not. I guess we only want to be able to click on one single rectangle at the time. So what we should do is to say that if this is clicked, then we actually don't want to break the for loop. We want to say that we want to set all the others to is clicked to false. So first we do this. Before checking if it's actually clicked, we set everything to false. So G square array square dot is clicked. We set it to false, right? So it's starting by not false. Actually, let's create a function for that. Let's create a function set. Maybe let's call it reset is clicked as a function. Just going to say this is clicked equal to false. Okay, so let's go inside our main file and say reset is clicked. It's a function, so parentheses. Okay, so first we reset everything to be not clicked, then we check if something is clicked. If it's nothing clicked, we're going to create a new square. If something is clicked, we're just going to redraw the wall rectangles, some filled and some stroked. All right, so let's give it a try. All right, it seems to be working. Awesome. Only one square can be clicked at any time. That's great. Oh, I think if two squares overlap, like in that case, they are going to be both clicked, which could be a problem. For the moment, let's just ignore the problem. So it's a good solution. No, that's not true, but let's just do it for the moment. So if something is clicked, we are just going to say outlet 0. So from our outlet, we're just going to say, just going to output the message clicked square, and then we're going to output its index, which is just square. This is the index in this array, right? So let's give it a try. Let's create a message box, see what we get out of that. So, right, click a square 0. Oh, we should actually do like this, and I think it's not going to be a symbol then. It's just going to be a list. Let's give it a try. Still going to be a symbol apparently. All right, then let's keep it like this. Just a symbol. We have to say from symbol. I guess there is a way to not get this as a symbol. There is definitely a way, but we can just do a from symbol in order to not get it as a symbol. So when we are with the mouse close to one of these corners of the rectangles, then we have to be able to select this corner and drag it and resize this square. So let's give it a try. You know what? Maybe we do it like this, that we can only resize the corners of a rectangle only if we already clicked on it. This is going to save us a bit of cycles because otherwise we should iterate through all the rectangles and through all the corners of all the rectangles, while in this way we only iterate through all the corners of the selected rectangle. So this is going to be a bit more performant. So let's do it like this. I don't want to print this is clicked anymore. So what I want to do is to go inside our class, square class, and on top of check if it's clicked, we are going to say check if corner selected or something like that. And that's going to be a function which is going to take the mouse as well. So we need the distance from all the corners of this rectangle. So let's do like this. This is the distance of the mouse to the top left corner. And this is going to be the square root, which we can get with math squared. We're going just to make the classical distance algorithm, so the Pythagorean theorem thing. So we're going to say this is going to be equal to this dot top left 0 minus mx multiplied. So this squared, so we just have to multiply that by itself. And now we need to sum to that the same thing, but for the epsilon. Let's just go on a new line. So this is going to be top left 1 minus m epsilon multiplied by top left 1 minus m epsilon. So that's the distance between the mouse and this actual corner. And then we need to do the same for all the other 3 corners, I guess. So this mouse top right. And let's copy these lines here. And let's see what we have to change. So we basically have to change here top left plus this width. That's going to be the right corner. And this we have to say this top left again plus this width. The epsilon stays the same, so we don't need to change that. And then let's copy all of that and let's go on the other corner. I think there could be actually a better way of doing this, but probably iterating through an array containing the position of the corners. Should we just do that instead of doing it this silly way? I guess we should. So let's keep this here for the moment. Let's go on top here and let's create actually... So let's create a variable here and let's call it square. Actually, let's call it just these corners. All right. So this is going to be an array containing the position for all our corners. So first the top left. So this is going to be simply this top left 0, this top left 1. Okay. So this is the top left corner. Then we need to get the top right corner. So this is going to be this top left 0 plus this width. And then it's going to be simply this top left 1 for the epsilon. All right. So this is the top right corner. Then we need the bottom right. So this is going to be this top left plus this width. Let's just recopy that. This top left plus this width, and then this top left 1 plus this height. New line. This is the bottom right. And then we need the bottom left, and this is just going to be this top left 0 not plus this white, just this left x, plus this top left 1 is, yeah, this is correct, semicolon, and this is our bottom left corner. Good. So when we resize our rectangle, we want to set again these corners. So let's actually create a function. This dot set corners function, and let's actually write this whole thing again inside this function. So every time we call this function we are going to set again all the corners, and we want to do it when we set the width and the height. That's the only moment in which we are resetting resizing our square. You remember we did that inside the onDrag function, set width and height. This is where we resize our square. I want to set the corners again. So good. So let's delete all this. Yes, let's delete all this stuff, and let's say for var corner in. Let's actually say for var I equal to 0. Let's do the classical way. I minus that these corners dot length, which is always 4 anyway. I plus plus. Oh, it's not always 4. It's actually 8 because I wrote the x and the epsilon as separated entities. Actually, we want to say that the x and the epsilon are actually an array of itself. So we want to say that this x and the epsilon thing is actually an array in itself with 2 components inside. So our corners array will be an array of size 4 and contains inside 4 arrays of size 2. So these are all little arrays of size 2. That's better this way, trust me. So let's set this here. And let's set this there. All right, and close our array. Cool. The same thing we had to copy in the set corner function. Looks good. And then what we got to do here, this corner's length is going to be 4. Now we have to get the distance between the mouse and these corners. So the distance is going to be the square root again between these corners I, so we are iterating through all the corners, 0, because that's going to be the x value of that corner, minus mx, and this multiplied by itself again, because we have to take the square of that. So, right, plus, and now the epsilon part. So let's just copy that. That's a bit easier and a bit more nice to understand what's going on like that, instead of writing every single distance manually, which was extremely silly. We just had to say epsilon with m epsilon, and these corners I1 with minus m epsilon. All right, so that should be it. So let's say if distance is less than, we need to say a size in pixels. So when the mouse is close enough to be to select a corner, let's say minus 20 pixels. Let's actually create a variable here. Let's say this dot corner selected, corner clicked. Okay, let's just call it corner selected. By default is -1, so it means nothing is selected. So if this corner selected, this corner selected is equal to I, which is the index of that corner. So I of 0 is going to be top left, I of 1 is going to be top right, I of 2 is going to be bottom right, I of 3 is going to be bottom left. So it goes in like clockwise way. Good. This corner selected equal I. And I guess if this is true, we just want to return this function, right? And we actually, I think we want to return the index of this corner. So this corner selected. Exactly. Good. So what happens when we select a corner? I guess we want to draw, with our M graphics, we want to draw a circle around this corner. So actually we don't want to, this corner selected is not going to be the index of the corner, it's actually going to be the position of the corner. So an array with 2 components. Exactly. So we want to set that to the position of the corner currently selected, which is going to be these corners I. It's going to give us the array, and we want to slice it because we don't want to copy, we don't want to make a reference to it. So let's return this corner selected, which is now the array containing the position, contains the x and epsilon position of the corner selected. Okay, I hope everything still clear. So, right, we have to check when the mouse is just idling on top of our JSUI object. We have to check once we click on a thing, on a square, and we need to check if we are close to one corner of this square. So what we need to do is to create an onIdle function. That's another function that we have available inside JSUI. It will give us the x and the epsilon position of the mouse again. And we have to say, for all the squares, again, we want to check if 1 is selected. We actually want to check only for the square that is currently selected, which we know which one is currently selected. This is something clicked should not be equal to false or true, should actually be equal to the index of the square selected. So let's call it like index square selected. Way with this clicked, let's call everything selected. So index square selected. Right, so is something selected is equal to -1 when we click, on click, right. But then, if it's something selected, index square selected, we set it equal to square, so it's going to be the index of the square selected. So we have to say if something, if index of square selected here is equal to -1, then we do that, it means nothing is selected. And then again here, if this is equal to -1, it means nothing is selected. Okay, good, let's just check if everything works still. Right, looks still good. So now let's go again inside the main file on idle. We actually don't want to we don't want to iterate through all the squares, we know already which one is selected, so if we have to say g index of square selected is different than -1, so we actually have selected something, Then we want to check through all our, we want to check with that we want to check that square inside the array of squares using that as the index. And then we want to call this function that we just created, which is check if corner selected. So once we click on a square, we check if the corner selected, we pass inside the x and the y of the mouse. Let's create another global variable. And this is going to be corner selected. This is going to be the position of that corner. So again, couple of -1 for the x and the y. And then inside the paint function, if after our for loop, we say if g corner selected 0, for example, is different than -1, then we need to, now we want to basically draw a little circle, I guess, around that square. So mgraphics.ellipse, I think it's called the function to draw a circle at that position. So g corner selected 0, g corner selected 1, and then the size of this ellipse, let's say 20 by 20, so for the width and the height. And then I guess we want to stroke it. So stroke. Maybe we can change the color first. So let's change the color to something like green. Right, so let's give it a try. Okay, we click on this. We want to check if a corner is selected. You know what? What we need to do is to actually redraw on idle function. We need to redraw because we want to call again the paint function to draw this little circle. So, oh, we didn't assign it. I didn't assign it to g corner selected. Sorry about that. So g corner selected should be equal to that comes out of here. Let's see if this works now. Click on that. Okay, we get errors. G corner selected is undefined, line 33. Although it's actually working, as you can see, it's drawing our little ellipse. It's not green, actually it's yellow. Line 33, we got an error. What is that? G corner selected. Why is this undefined? What is this corner selected by default? Is -1 to 1. So what happens in case we don't return, in case we don't change it, is simply going to be equal to -1. So let's actually assign it. If no corners is selected, let's just assign it again to -1. So, and then return this corner selected here. So we return the function here, slice it. Actually, we don't need to, we need to return the function as well here, or otherwise we return the function here after we assign it again to -1. So now it should be always defined, at least. Let's give it a try. Yes, seems to be working now. Now it seems to be working. Okay, this is yellow, which is not good. Let's make it blue, maybe. Let's actually also make it a bit bigger, the stroke line. So there is an option we can give to mgraphic to set the line width. So say set line width equal to, I don't know, let's say 3. Let's see what happens. So, right, there is our corner. So as you can see, it's actually starting to draw it. It's using the corner as the top left corner, I guess, for this ellipse. For this circle, we actually want to set it at the center of the circle. I guess we just need to detract half of the size of the circle to that. So circle size, let's just create a variable for that. And let's say this is going to be that minus circle size divided by 2, and that as well. And this is going just to be, whoops, and this is just going to be circle size. Okay, good. So let's give it a try again. And there we go. Now it's centered around the corners. Good. We are in a good spot, fellas. We are in a good spot to start dragging these squares. Although it's complex. It's a complex task that we are challenged to. We will manage. So what we need to do, so once we click on our square, I want to be able to click inside the circle of the corner, if a corner is highlighted, And then if a corner is highlighted and clicked, we want to basically drag this and exchange this corner to something else. Okay, let's work on that. First, we need to check if the corner is clicked. So check if corner is selected. That's basically it. This is actually checking if the mouse is close enough to the corner. So if the mouse is close enough to the corner and we are clicking, so now we have to check the click function here, and we have to say, is corner selected? So on click, we have to say, is the corner selected different than 1? So on click, we got the mouse in a square selected, blah blah blah. Then in a square selected, right. And then under that, let's say if G corner selected 0, so the first element of this array, the X position, we could take also the Y, doesn't really matter, just we have to check that it's different than -1. If this is true, then we actually want to resize the square. Actually, I think we want to do it directly in the onDrag function. So in the onDrag function, after that, if G corner selected is different than -1, we want to resize our square. So inside our square class, let's make a function, say Resize Square, takes the mouse X and Y, and we want to say this corner selected, right. We need, inside that, we need as well actually the index of that corners. Right, we don't want to have the position of the corner selected inside our class. This is going just to be the array. This is just going to be the index of that corner. So index corner selected, it's equal to -1 by default. But inside, when we check if a corner is selected, we just want to return these corners i.slice, right? And otherwise, if we don't encounter anything, we just return an array containing -1, -1. And then we want to say this index corner selected is equal to I here. Otherwise, this index corner selected, if we didn't find anything, we're just setting it to -1. Right, this should work. So now, inside here, now inside our function Resize Square, let's say like this. These corners, index corner select, this index corner selected, so the index of that corner, we're going to set it equal to mx and my, so the position of the mouse. And now we just need to go back from corners to rect. So we just need basically to set this top left is going to be equal to these corners 0. That's the first, let's also slice it, that's the first corner, right? Then this width is going to be equal to this top left 0. Basically, this is equal to these corners 1, 0. So the X element minus this top left, right? And then this height is going to be equal to basically one of the bottom corners, so the 2 element 1 because it's the Y minus this top left 1, all right? Good. Resize squares. Then we actually want to redraw. When we redraw, it's just going to get the rectangle, get rect exactly, which will return our top left, this white is height. Okay, good. So that's all good. So resize square, exactly. We want to call this function here inside onDrag. We want to say G squares array, and the index of the selected index square selected, which we assume is different than -1, otherwise there wouldn't be no corner selected. But anyway, let's check also for that. Index square selected is different than -1. Dot resize square, exactly, with X and Y, and then we want to redraw, so mgraphics.redraw. All right, I really don't know if this works, so let's give it a try. I click on this, and then I click on here, and of course is not working because we are still checking actually. We are still checking when we click. If we are outside the rectangle, we are still going to go and create a new rectangle. So what we got to do here is to say, right, we don't want to check if it's clicked if our corner is still selected, right? So let's do like this. We only check if something is clicked if the corner selected is different than -1. That's when we check if something is selected. Right. So let's give it a try. Oh, of course. Actually, sorry, I wrote wrong. If this is equal to -1, not if it's different. If this is equal to -1, we check it, of course. And let's check. Ah, it's still drawing some new stuff. All right. So this is tricky. What's going on? This is equal to -1. So the first one we should be able to click. And in fact, we are able to click the first one and some more. Actually, we are able, once we create a circle, once we go close to a corner, then we're not able to click anymore. So let's see what's going on. So actually, we want to say when we finish dragging, so when the button is equal to 0, let me check actually, let's print the button, let's see what comes out of button. Plus a new line. So let's give it a try. Does it mean that when I finish dragging, it's going to be 0? Yes, that's great. So what we want to say is if button is equal to 0, so if not button, basically, G corner selected is equal to -1, -1. All right. All right, so this should at least reset the condition for which we cannot click anymore on squares. All right, so this is working indeed. Now, what we want to do is to be able still to drag using the circles on the corners. On drag. So we selected a corner. Is different than 1, and index square selected should be also different than -1, right? Unless we are actually setting it somewhere. We are setting it on click actually. Okay, so on click we are setting it to -1, right? And then we are not checking if it's clicked. So of course this was never going to happen. So actually this we should actually put after the checking if a corner is selected, then we want to set the index of the square selected to -1. Right, otherwise it was not working. Oh, right. It is sort of working, guys. It is sort of working, but not really. So what's going on here? What's wrong? It looks like it only works on the epsilon dimension and only going only on the bottom left corner for some reason. Oh no, it works also here. Here it works correctly. So there's something very wrong going on here. I guess we should check. Whoa, if I clear the thing, I get an error, right? So when we clear this whole thing, now we got a bunch more stuff to set. We basically want to say that the index square selected is equal to -1, and the corner selected is also equal to -1, -1. If I drag the top right corner, is only working on the x direction. Let's try to fix that. So how does it work? Resize Square. So the width is going to be equal to the these corners 1, exactly, because it's the top right corner. It's 0 for the x. Good. And the height is going to be these corners 2, exactly, so that bottom right 1 minus this top left 1. So this looks actually pretty okay. This top left is equal to this corner 0. Let's first do one thing. If we resize the square, we still want to update our corner position. So in the so we want to visualize the circles moving with the corners. So what we want to do here is to change the G corner selected exactly, and say, okay, if we are moving this corner, we want to also set its position to basically the X and the Y, right? Right. So let's give it a try, at least for that. Okay, so this is now visualizing the corner on the right place. And this is only working on the Y dimension. All right, so why is that? This corner is going to be equal to mx, my, and we set the whole stuff again. Right. So we are just updating the x and the y of this corner here, but the top left, for example, is going to get from the first corner, and here we're going to actually to get the height from the top left. So this is just bypassing completely our new size of the square. So big mistake. Okay, everyone, I thought about a solution, but it's extremely dumb. But nevertheless, we're going to implement it. We don't care at all about dumbness. You're going to check for every corner, and for every corner we're going to set the position of all other corners, so there are no possible mistakes to be done here. So if we select the corner 0, what happens? First it happens that these corners 0 is equal to mx and my, right? The position of the mouse, since it's the actual corner selected. And now we only need to set the other 3 corners. So what happens with this corner 1s? Basically, this corner 1, so the y component is going to be equal to my, and also these corners 3, so the bottom left x is going also to be equal to my, right? So now we just need to do this thing for the other 3 corners. So else if the corner selected is the corner 1, we want to set corners 1 to that, so so that will be the top right. And then for the bottom right, so the 2, we have to set his x position to be equal to mx. And for the first corner, so the top left, we have to set his y position to be equal to my, I think, for the mouse y. Right, then let's go on with the bottom right. Bottom right becomes equal to the mouse position. Then let's see, we have to change the y position of the bottom left. And then we need to change what? Yes, the x position of the top right. Right, so the x position of the top right becomes mx. And then the last one. And then the last corner, so bottom left, becomes equal to the mouse. And then these corners, the bottom right, we have to set is y, that's correct. And then the top left, we have to change is x, right. So these should be all. And then we assign our top left variable, our width and our height. And it should be really no more misunderstanding between us and the code. So let's check this out. I'm creating a rectangle, I'm going to modify it, and as you can see, all the corners now work. We can resize it using those little circles. Amazing. I think we got it. It was complex. There is a lot of stuff we could work still on. We could have basically, for example, as a minimum size of rectangles, so we cannot create like super minuscule rectangles. This will not work. We would have maybe a minimum size of rectangles. That will be great. We could add all this kind of stuff, but we could actually even resize a bit like the mesh warp tool that we created with cycling, where you can actually also move the rectangle themselves. This would be a nice addition, but I'm not going to do it now because I'm tired. This took like a couple of hours or something like that. And you are tired as well. So let's just close it here. If you have some more requests on these, just let me know and I will do it. I will do other videos on it. Otherwise, let's wrap it up. If you follow this whole thing, thank you very much. You are amazing, and I'm proud of your effort. So, I hope you also learned something in the process. And people, like the video, subscribe to the channel, check the pattern, the usual stuff. And thank you very much for following. I will see you in the next video. I will go take a tea or something, and see you soon. Ciao.